As an aerospace engineer, how your day starts?
So my company is mostly flexible with their work hours, so we don't have any typical work hours, and I tend to sleep late, so I just wake up whenever I feel like start with my work.
I'm very fascinated about like what Elon Musk does for the humanity. So, do you think aerospace startups in India are going to sustain?
I think ISRO being already existing is the biggest advantage to us. Like I said, it's one of the biggest industries in the world in defense sector or in the space race.
How do you test all these softwares and all the systems and the circuits? Is it in a virtual environment or any prototypes?
So we do have a lot of prototypes, but then we also have this simulated environment on the ground. So whatever you can see on the cockpit, you'll have an exact replica of that cockpit on the ground.
If someone wants to do their own startup in aerospace, what are the things they should take into the consideration apart from the formalities?
Any startup in aerospace industry cannot be done by one person for sure. Actually building rocket systems, because that's one of the things. India is known for launching rockets cheaper, so
affordable rockets.
Yeah, affordable rockets.
What is the scope of jobs in the government sector or in the defense sector?
India is, I think, the fourth largest defense or space industry in this world, and it is only booming. You've seen the recent mission to Mars, the mission to Moon, so you will always have at least a career in defense.
Video, Ms. Sumanvitha. It's glad to have you on this show. So, before we move further into the podcast, can you give a brief introduction about yourself to the audience?
Sure, thank you so much for having me here. And I am Sumanvitha. I am basically from Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh. I did my bachelor's in aerospace engineering from Amity University, and I've been working as a senior lead engineer in flight control systems department for Collins Aerospace.
Okay. It's interesting. What's more interesting is like in the trending era of softwares and robotics and AI, you have chosen something different, like aerospace engineer. So, what made you to choose that domain?
So the reason for aerospace is back when I was choosing majors in college, I had a lot of options. You had computer science, you had mechanical, ECE, electronics, and I was super confused as to what to choose. And aerospace was that one thing. I was definitely scared of it because it was none of my family or friends ever did aerospace. So it was scary, but also that is one field that I heard that you will get to learn everything. You need a computer science engineer, you need an electronics engineer, you also need mechanical engineers, because obviously the entire frame works on mechanical or structural integrity. So that's one domain that deals with all these engineering. So I thought, yeah, I'll choose this. Maybe I'll get to learn a lot of things.
Okay. So, where does aeronautical or aerospace stand in the current market? Like, what's the demand out there?
So if you've seen historically, aerospace or aeronautics in general has never seen a downward curve. You'll always have people who wants to fly to a certain destination faster. You'll always want the packages that you're getting delivered to be done faster. You will always need to communicate with others where you need satellites. You will also be exploring if you've seen current markets, there are missions to Mars, missions to Moon, again flying people back to Moon. So you will always have these needs. So you have historically never seen a downward curve in aerospace, and you'll also not
Even
be seeing
in the
it.
World Wars, majorly they were focusing on aerospace and that thing, right?
Yeah, obviously. So you can never have wars without missiles and so rockets. So yeah, interesting thing about World War now that you brought about it. So after World War, so there was a slight downward dip in aerospace or research and technology. So what happened was there this company called Raytheon Technologies, which is my parent company. They ended up designing microwave ovens.
So microwave is invented by them?
Yeah, it is by the engineer who belongs to Raytheon Technologies.
It's interesting, like microwave.
Yeah, microwave oven. Your top microwaves.
Okay. So can you differentiate what is the aeronautical or aerospace? Do they stand in the same domain, or are there two different things?
So aerospace is like a blanket term or a parent thing in which aeronautics falls into, and also satellites or rocket systems also fall under. So aeronautical deals with anything that is in Earth's atmosphere, be it your aircrafts, your air balloons, your UAVs, anything that has to deal with air pressure and difference in air pressure. That is where aeronautical comes into picture. You have to send missions to other planetary objects or those kind of. That's where satellite systems and rocket systems come into picture, and all those things will fall under aerospace.
If someone wants to get into the aeronautical engineer, what are the prerequisites students need to take into the consideration?
I think I would say first thing is they should be interested in it, because, like I said, you will have to learn a lot of things to be an aerospace engineer. In the first 2 years, our courses are mostly common. You will have the same courses that a computer science engineer or a mechanical engineer would be learning. So, but as and when you go through semesters, your physics inside it keeps increasing. So you'll need a lot of patience to learn a lot of things. So that's what I would say. Unless you really are interested in that domain, I would like.
And
I would say
unless physics is your favorite subject, right?
not necessarily. I think when I first started with aerospace, physics was not my favorite. But then you learn to fall in love with it, because who wouldn't be amazed seeing just the movement in air pressure increase, like helps your aircraft like that. It's interesting, so you will fall in love with it. It's just that you will have to put in a lot of work as well. That's the only thing.
So after getting into the college, what are the other things apart from technical skills students should focus on?
I guess I would say, at least for my career, the thing that helped me most was my internship. So my college mandates internships after second and third year of college. But even if your college doesn't do that, I would say going for internships really adds to your resume. So for my second year, after my second year, I learned this design analysis tools called KTR Analysis. So that helps you understand the tools that you'll be needing in future if you ever pursue your design engineering or analysis engineering in aerospace. And after that, I did my second internship in DRDL, which tells you how the industry works, how defense sector, that was a defense sector, so how the scientists work, how projects typically work. So I think internships is what adds a lot of value to your career.
Okay. As you mentioned about projects, how crucial are projects in this field, and what kind of projects do they actually make? Like, what was your project during Amity University?
So my project was autonomous UAV for crop surveillance, to be exact. So to answer your question on how important projects are, I would say, like, that's the most important thing you can ever do. Don't do anything. Just chill out for the first years, but still focus on what your projects are. Even if you buy your projects, learn everything about those projects, because that's what tells you about what you've learned. And so when an interviewer is interviewing, they'll have a start and end point. They'll know exactly what that project is, because they are in that industry, so they will most probably know what is happening there. So you should know what you did. You should also be confident about what you did, and try to bring in everything that you've learned throughout your years into that project. So for instance, my project that I said was UAVs, autonomous UAVs for crop surveillance. So what it does is, it tries to fly in a certain path, scan a certain field area. So
Scan the ground.
So yeah, so scan the ground of a crop. Let's say you have paddy crop. It's difficult to constantly monitor for bugs and stuff, right? But then you have when you take thermal imaging into consideration, a healthy crop looks a certain way and an unhealthy crop looks a certain way. So my project was to develop a UAV that automatically flies at a certain duration every day, certain time every day, looks for these imaging scans. If there is any issues in the thermal imaging, it will alert the farmer or the operator. That was my project.
So, is it important during internships also, like while going for the internships, projects and all? Like, how did you approach your first internship?
So during my first internship, I didn't actually do any projects, because projects typically happen in fourth year, right? So for my second year, I had no clue that. So the project that I picked up, I tried to combine all my internships knowledge. So I needed to design and analyze how a UAV is gonna be and how the structural forces, how the structural impact is gonna be for that UAV to make sure it's stable. So for that, I used my second year's learning, which is computer aided design and analysis. I brought in that and tried to incorporate in my project. And the next internship where I did in DRDO, I had to perform some simulations using MATLAB, where I had to design I think that is confidential for defense one, so I won't be able to talk about it. But I had to design a certain thing for a missile, subsonic cruise missile that DRDL was developing. There I had to learn MATLAB. So I combined all these things in my project. So where I had to learn design and analysis in second year, third year was MATLAB, and I used all these 3 tools to develop my project. So that gave an understanding to the interviewer that, okay, I learned all these things and I also know how to use my skills to fulfill their project. So any interviewer would be looking for, okay, can they efficiently do my project? Most of the people will know C or aerospace or those things. It's just that you need to know how to put that into good use. I think that's how your project should be.
As you mentioned your internship in DRDO, so what is the scope of jobs and in the government sector or in the defense sector?
So in most of the cases, defense sector, be it DRDL, DRDO or ISRO, it's always through government exams. So you will have to give GATE, and after that you'll have an interview process. So that's a different thing. No, even if you're not an aerospace engineer, you can obviously get into these domains by clearing the typical exams. So the openings for that, we have no control over it, but the thing is we will always have openings for it. That's something that we know. As you must be seeing, India is, I think, the 4th largest defense or space industry in this world. So and it is only booming. You've seen the recent mission to Mars or mission to Moon. So you will always have at least a career in defense industry.
Okay. So what about the private sector? Like, what are the opportunities in the private sector when it comes to a job in the aeronautical engineer or in the aerospace engineer?
I think private sector is like the most lucrative, I should say. Obviously, you have a lot of startups these days in aerospace engineering or aerospace industry from India, but also there are established companies, not from now, from before the world wars. So they're so old and so rich. Whatever research and development that happens in aerospace industry, that just flows down to other industries. So the autopilots that happens in Teslas, they're getting it from the autopilots that we've developed. So industry is experienced, they have a lot of need, and like I said, industry always grows. So
the question is like, you were from Amity University, so what are the opportunities, like who are not from the top 1 or tier 2 college? What about all the tier 3 colleges? Like, if someone from there want to get into the aeronautical engineer, or do companies look for them?
Yes, they do look for them. So like I said, we will also need computer science engineer. So all the software that goes into aerospace or the design elements that goes into aircraft, they have to be designed by a mechanical engineer or a computer science engineer. So we obviously need those as well. But the problem happens is they don't know what are the openings. So most of the cases, they will not. A computer science engineer will not see the openings for an aerospace company. So that's where the tricky part is. But if you're really interested, first thing is know what the companies are and look for the job profile. So you will always have LinkedIn where you can browse a typical aerospace engineer. Just type the tag word aerospace. You'll find a lot of people with LinkedIn profiles. Just go through a LinkedIn profile, see what they have learned, and I would say go through that.
Okay, so how does the interview of an aeronautical engineer looks like? How typical it is? How tough it is? Where do you scale it from 1 to 10 in the tough scale?
I mean, the only other interview that I attended other than my company was Tech Mahindra interview. I think I would say that. So the difference was, in that interview, they just observed whether or not I can learn things. So I didn't have any coding background. So when during my TechM interview, I had nothing to tell them. I just told what I've learned in my first year of college, and after that, I didn't know much about software. So that's what they saw. They saw whether or not I can actually pick up things and learn things. But in case of an aerospace interview, because you have been learning that domain, you'll obviously have to have a knowledge of all the subjects that you have learned along with other things. So your coding or those things will add on, your projects will add on, but they will also be asking your actual engineering questions. So it was definitely much more trickier than Tech Mahindra.
How do they test, or what they look into the candidate before hiring them for this particular role?
So I have this one interesting question. So I still remember there is this industry standard that aerospace follows, where all your every system that goes into your airplane has to be developed. The software for it has to be developed to a certain standard called DO 178. They have to follow those guidelines. They also look for your analytical skills along with technical skills.
Okay. Because like you have mentioned about analytical skills, and candidates don't often focus on these things, but as an aerospace engineer, can you tell like why soft skills are very important in this field or in any engineering field to get into a particular job or a particular role?
So I think that's actually a good thing you asked about it, because most of the people, they focus on what they're studying and getting good grades and stuff, but most of the cases you know a lot of things, but projects are not developed by a single individual, they're developed by a team. And when you have to work in a team, you'll need to communicate with the other team, not just about things, but also think together. So not just communicate together, so you have to understand the other person's language or their thought process, to be exact. So I think that's where all these GDs or debates and projects, because most of the cases you have a certain perspective in your project, and other person might not agree. But then if you don't proceed with the right way, you will be spending a lot of revenue and you'll have a lot of losses to the company. That is not really always appreciated. So if you have a certain opinion, you have to be able to communicate it properly. What you know is important, but how well you can communicate what you know is also equally important, or in cases much more important.
I mean, how well you can think is also important in this field, because a minor change in the values can mess up with the whole system, right?
Yes, so that is actually true. So most people are aware that US follows a different standard of measurement compared to the rest of the world, right? So there was this one space project. So this was I think some Apollo mission, I don't remember what exactly that was, where the scientists or the people who were developing used a different metric system. So most of the aerospace or defense happens in FPS systems, so imperial systems. So I'm not sure which one they used, but they used one instead of the other, and because of that, the entire mission was gone. Like it didn't even leave the Earth. It blasted off in midair.
Okay.
So yeah, a minor mistake will cost you billions.
As an aerospace engineer, how your day starts?
So my company is mostly flexible with their work hours, so we don't have any typical work hours, and I tend to sleep late, so I just wake up whenever I feel like, start with my work. And most of my team again is in US. I'm the only person here in India, so I'll just start slow work. So I think right now we are in a stage where most of the aircraft that we are developing have already been flying for 20-30 years now. So there's not much active development that is happening. So we just see, for most of the times we are working with customer issues. One of the most common issues is the 737 MAX that happened recently. So
is it a Boeing thing?
Thing.
Okay, so how do you work on these things? You know, you can't go and directly work into the airspace, but how do you test all these softwares and all the systems? So kits? Is it any virtual environment or any prototypes?
So we do have a lot of prototypes, but then we also have this simulated environment on the ground. So whatever you can see on the cockpit, you'll have an exact replica of that cockpit on the ground, where you can actually fly the aircraft. Every action that a pilot performs, we will have to first perform on this ground rig. We call it a system rig. We run our simulations on there. We fly an aircraft. We try to stall the aircraft. By stall, I mean it falls drastically at a speed that you can't get it back up. So we perform all the failure scenarios. We try to pitch it up. By pitch, I mean you have to pull it up so high that it'll drastically go up. So you have to perform all these extreme conditions as well. So that's where we have a virtual rig. We also have certain engineers called flight test engineers. That's kind of my goal. We don't have a lot of flight test engineers in India, but yeah. So before we deliver anything to our customer, be it Boeing or Airbus or anyone, we have to test the thing that we have developed on an airplane. So we have a airplane where we try to integrate our boxes and fly the airplane, record all the data, make sure the data is correct, and then we deliver it. So that's where we have different levels of testing. We have a simulated testing here. The simulations that you see, where maybe in Sully you might have seen, that is one type of test that happens.
Like you're opening many portals of my brain. So it's quite interesting. Like you're working on different things. So as someone who has pursued aeronautical engineer, what are the fields they can go into?
I think at least in your bachelor's, the course is already so vast that you can't learn much about any one domain in particular. So let's say you are an aerospace engineer and you want to go to mechanical domain. You will have enough skills definitely, but you will also fall back to a typical mechanical engineer. You'll also be learning a computer science stuff. You'll also have to learn basic coding, but you will definitely fall behind a typical computer science engineer. But then you have so many skills that your options drastically increase too. So a mechanical engineer can only apply for mechanical jobs, but then an aerospace engineer can always apply for any of the jobs. So that's where they have an advantage.
I have always heard this thing about every engineering domain. Like computer science can always apply to any other jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. So what are the skills they do look like? What are the major skills do hiring people look? The HRs look when they are interviewing a candidate.
So one of the major things obviously is based on the role. You will need to learn the domain knowledge. You'll need to know the software background, because at least in India, the advantage for Indian subcontinent is their software skills. You will because it doesn't require a lot of investment or investments. In the software sector, obviously is booming, so obviously they'll be looking for software skills, because it's not a big investment for them as well. So most of the software happens here. But also you'll need to know the aerospace knowledge. But the thing is, they will also train you on the other thing. Let's say you're an aerospace engineer and you lack software skills. They'll train you on software skills. But you're a software engineer, lack aerospace skills. The first few years, they'll train you on aerospace skills. So
okay. So that's so how do you see the future of aviation industry, like the job opportunity or the growth in the aviation industry?
I think, like I said, it does never go down, and especially these days, you might be seeing a lot of buzz in UAVs and drone technology. You will be seeing, like I said, Uber recently started Uber Air mobility concept, where they try to deliver packages. So we have Uber Eats in United States, where they deliver food, right? So they're trying to incorporate UAVs to deliver that stuff. We also have Amazon, which is delving into urban air mobility.
Yeah, delivering the products through air drones.
Exactly. So you have a lot of advancements in drone tech. Aerospace industry is always booming. So, like I said, most of the aircraft right now were developed 30 years back, so they'll have to have a fresh.
So air transports are snatching jobs of on-road transports.
They can't snatch per se, because you could say that even on-road is right now going into autopilots and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you could say.
So do you think any soon autopilot is going to be in every vehicle, or like in the transportation in India particularly?
not in next 10 years per se, but then it is going to be the future. You will always so obviously electric cars are going to take over. That's because of carbon emissions. You will have to find an alternative, and the best option right now is electric. And when you incorporate electric, you will have opportunities to incorporate more autonomous systems. So you already have many cars in India where you're seeing cruise controls over. So you'll see that they'll be flowing down to lower end cars as well, or the budget friendly cars as well. So it'll just keep.
Have you heard a recent, not recent, few years back, statement by Nitin Gadkari? Like, he said that will not allow autonomous cars in India because many people are going to lose their jobs. So, what do you think about it? Are you going to say no to him, or?
Not necessarily, but the thing is, they can also be saying the same thing for anything, be it AI these days. So everywhere, if one thing comes, another thing loses another person or another community loses their jobs, but then they will end up finding something new. Like for instance, your paper companies or your printing companies, with the advancement in technology, phones or laptops or iPads, the need for them reduced, but then they had to find an alternative. They got an alternative. So the people whose jobs will be reducing will be taken over by the jobs market for another thing will be increasing. That way, on a whole, you will always find a balance.
Okay. So, as you spoken about AI, so I'm sorry, like in every episode I bring about this topic. So, does aviation industry use AI, like in the major or in the minor things?
Okay, obviously AI is the one of the most important things right now, so you'll have to talk about it. But I have this one interesting thing that I wanted to talk about. So you must be seeing the displays inside a cockpit if anyone observed it.
Yeah.
So they are still now touchless. You can't touch them manually. They will have to be moved through buttons. The recent aircraft that we are developing, we are trying to incorporate touch.
Okay.
And even that touch is resistive touch. By resistive touch, I mean the touch screens that we had before the Galaxies and before the Galaxy Ys and stuff. So you have to touch them really hard to actually use them. So there's still resistance there. So any technology that comes into aerospace industry is kind of challenging to be accepted or to be sent into a flight. It needs a lot of it needs to pass through a lot of regulations. So it is difficult. AI is one of those things. But the interesting thing is, in case of aircrafts, you have a lot of data to process. Like for instance, your flight data, you'll have to process the air around it. You'll have to process airplane performance, like your engine values, your speed values. They have a lot of data to be processed, and AI is the best option. You will need to. Most of the cases, it's gonna be common. Any aircraft performs similar way in almost all the flights. So you will have a lot of opportunity for AI to be incorporated there because you have a lot of predict data, and also most of the cases it's always predictable data.
So
gonna be challenging to incorporate both.
Quite interesting. So what is your current role in your company? Can you tell something about your current company, like?
So yeah,
your roles and responsibilities and what they're working on.
So I work for Collins Aerospace, like I said, and it's a subsidiary of Raytheon Technologies. It's, I think, the second biggest aerospace and defense company in the world in terms of revenue. And I particularly work on flight controls department. So most of the times, pilot flies the plane. Most of the cases, they will not be actually flying the plane. They'll just be roaming around. I mean, I shouldn't say roaming around, but it'll not be that hands-on. And it's only during takeoff and landing that they actually fly it or intervene it, and is always going to be autopilot, which flies it automatically once you choose a starting and ending destination. So that's where I come into picture. I design the systems for autopilots and guidance of the aircraft.
Okay. So how since childhood I was amazed, like how this things work. Like in air, how do they know they are going to a particular location? Like for an on-road thing, we use map. So is there any technology?
Yeah,
maps. Okay.
Not exactly maps. So
okay.
So any aircraft, I mean any airborne systems or even ships, for instance, any of these safety critical systems, have to use multiple sources of inputs. So in case of airplanes, we have something, we obviously have GPS. We also have something called INS. We have multiple systems that actually measures your exact location using satellites, using your initial position and your final position. They have multiple options to map your exact location. But yeah, they have maps. It's just the mapping system is much more complicated.
Is Collins hiring actively currently?
So as of now, we are not actively hiring for freshers, but we are. There is hiring happening actively for engineers 4+ with experience 4+.
Okay, so what do they see in the candidate, like before the interview or during the interview?
I think it depends on, obviously it depends from role to role, but if a person is experienced in a computer science domain, they'll look for most common things like you have your Python or C++ or any of the software coding development language and scripting language. That's or MATLAB. That's where they see for an avionics engineer. For a mechanical engineer, they will see a computer aided design software. You have a computer aided analysis software. So they'll see those kind of tools. And also you have obviously hardware and manufacturing engineers. They will look for say maintenance engineering, aircraft maintenance engineering. There are a bunch of things. That's where that comes into picture.
Okay, so let's get deep into it. Like, I'm very fascinated about like what Elon Musk does for the humanity. So, like EVs or autonomous cars and reusable rockets. So, do you think the aerospace startups in India are going to sustain?
They will definitely sustain.
Even like like ISRO is already existing. So, do you think they are going to sustain? Correct.
I think ISRO being already existing is the biggest advantage to us. Like I said, it's one of the biggest industries in the world in defense sector or in the space race. And we also have a bunch of startups like Skyroad Aerospace which are successfully launching satellites into space. So we have potential, we have the engineers. With right investments, we will obviously be able to have a sustainable growth. That's where I think the challenge faces, because the industry is so costly that most people wouldn't even be investing in the first place. You have a lot of options as well. You drone technology, which does not need a lot of investment. You also have satellite systems or space race, which needs a lot of investment, but also they have a lot of knowledge. So chances are it's gonna succeed.
If someone wants to do their own startup in aerospace, what are the things they should take into the consideration apart from the formalities?
I think you first need to make sure how much you're gonna ready to invest, because, like I said, aerospace industry, any startup in aerospace industry cannot be done by one person for sure. Actually building rocket systems, because that's one of the things. India is known for launching rockets cheaper, so
affordable rockets.
Yeah, affordable rockets. So
have you seen this thing on social media? Like, it was cheaper than making Interstellar.
Yeah, that is true, because obviously Indian market is cheaper in terms you don't have to pay an Indian engineer the equal amount that you'll be paying to NASA engineer or a NASA engineer. Yeah. So that is where you'll save a lot of money. Raw material costs would be mostly similar because you'll be sourcing from the same places, but labor charges is where you save a lot of money.
Do you think India gonna have SpaceX, their own SpaceX?
I am more positive that either India is gonna be the next SpaceX, or else ISRO will end up becoming the next SpaceX. Okay. Because the next 10-15 years, at least from my opinion, is India's in terms of space race. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. So I think after this podcast, many people are going to be aware of this field. So if someone who already completed the bachelor's, how they can start their career as an aerospace engineer from here?
So start your working in your any company based on your career, and you can always switch to any aerospace industry based on openings. Keep looking for the openings, and you can always switch based on your expertise. We also have an option where you can do your master's in aerospace. So aerospace is such a domain which is typically more ideal for a master's student than a bachelor's student. So any person who did their bachelor's can always choose an equivalent. So say a person did their master's in mechanical, they could choose a master's in aerostructures or aerodynamics, which will mostly align with mechanical things in aerospace. So they always have an opportunity to also do academic growth in aerospace.
So are there any Indian companies that are hiring Indian MNCs for aeronautical engineering?
If you want Indian MNCs in particular, so we don't have a lot of Indian-based companies in terms of aerospace. We have tie-ups with other companies. Like for instance, Tata has a tie-up with Boeing, and they have a factory here called Tata Boeing. That is one of the things that they can look out for. We also have startups like Skyroot Aerospace and bunch of drone technologies, drone companies that are hiring. So that is something that they can look out for. But we also have a lot of European and American startups like Boeing or our company Collins Aerospace. We also have Airbus and a bunch of other companies that they can look out for.
Okay. So we are at the end of the podcast. So what's the one advice you would like to give to all the students, irrespective of their field, want to make big in their field? What's the one advice would you like to give to them?
In next 5 years, you want to see yourself as this person.
Okay.
So find that person. It doesn't have to always be a person that you can always be a LinkedIn. You can always look out on LinkedIn or any other places, or just find the resume of the person that you want to be in.
Okay.
And start developing your resume as per that.
Okay. Thank you, Sumanvitha. Thank you.
Sure,
It's a
thank
pleasure
you so
to.
much.
Thank you.